The Let Kashmir Decide movement is bringing to you a brand new show on JKTV where you will get the latest updates and analysis into the situation in Indian-occupied Kashmir.
Modi and the Indian government want the world to believe that all is well in Indian-occupied Kashmir, but that is decidedly not the case. Join us and different guests every Thursday for insight into the latest developments in the Kashmiri freedom struggle.
Good evening. Welcome to Let Kashmir Decide with Claire Bidwell and Mary Scully. I'm a human rights activist and a teacher from Scotland, and Mary is a human rights activist and political writer in the USA. This week we're going to be exploring the Kashmir Files and the impact that is having around the globe, and the impact it's having on religious divide and hatred. We've got two very special, knowledgeable guests with us tonight that I'm looking forward to introducing themselves when they come in. We have Haroon with us from Australia and Altaf from Pakistan with us tonight. 6 o'clock in the morning in Australia, midnight in Pakistan. So we really are very grateful to them. Good evening, Mary.
Good evening.
How are you this week?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, and so am I.
So discussion.
Yeah, very much so. So the Kashmir Files, Mary, would you like to share just a 2 minutes overview on your feelings and thoughts of this film and why we're having this conversation tonight and why it's so important?
Well, you know, the idea of a pandit genocide has been one of the main propaganda weapons that the Hindu far right has been using against the Kashmiri freedom struggle. And this film really makes that myth, that propaganda, a historic fact. It tries to present it as such. And I think that we cannot, as many have suggested, just ignore this film. We have to consider it an ideological attack on the Kashmiri freedom struggle. And that's why it's important for us to have people like Dr. Haroon and Altaf discuss this and clarify what actually happened. So in order for us to really come out of this attack with a broader understanding of what happened, because something terrible did happen to the pandits in that period and to
and very much. And I think I'm wanting to explore as well, which we both guessed that must come out, is obviously the religious divide and that being used as a hatred to, you know, the Muslims being presented in such an unfair and biased way to create that and cause that hate. So, you know, the research and the background on the way the propaganda is used, the way it's used against humanity as well, towards their favoured way, as you said. So we'll bring in tonight's guests and then look forward, Mary, to you chatting with each of them. So good evening to you, Altaf. Thank you very much for joining us, and we're aware it's very late there at night, so thank you so much.
Hello. Thank you very much, Mary and Claire Bidwell, for having me on this show. It's always very good to see both of you, to talk to you in different shows and different webinars, and you have been always very kind to attend those webinars, and I'm always very happy to listen to you people. And today I will be talking to you people.
Yeah.
So
which
I'm
we're looking forward to.
I'm from basically Kashmir.
Thank you. And we'll say
I'm human rights activist from.
We always both love being on your show, Altaf. So this is an honor for us.
Thank you.
That's good. And we'll say good morning to Haroon in Australia. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Claire. Good morning, Mary. Good morning, Altaf.
And thank you so much for coming along and joining in with this discussion. And we're very much looking forward to the insight. So I will hand over to Mary, that will ask you then both to introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about you. So thank you. And Mary, over to you.
Yes, we like to begin by asking our guests to tell us about who they are, where they come from, how they became political activists and thinkers. And so, could we begin with you, Altaf? To tell us something about yourself, and then Harun, you.
I'm Altaf Wani. I'm basically from Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir. I was a student leader, a student activist in Kashmir, and in 90s I migrated to Azad Kashmir, and thereafter I joined the politics and activism. I'm currently the chairman of Kashmir Institute of International Relations and one of the oldest think tanks based in Azad Kashmir, a Kashmiri think tank in also in Pakistan. And I have been working on the Kashmir cause since last, I think, 33 years. I have written a lot on Kashmir. I have been on the Commission and Subcommission of Human Rights in Geneva, and also the Human Rights Council, and also to around the globe to create an awareness on Kashmir. And currently, I am in Islamabad as chairman Kashmir Institute of International Relations. I am also a political activist representing a political party of Indian occupied Kashmir, namely Jammu Kashmir National Front.
Thank you.
That's Altaf.
Thank you. Harun, can you tell us about yourself?
Hi, Mary. Yeah, look, I must say that, I was telling this before we started this conversation, that in terms of Kashmir, I'm the least qualified to speak because I'm as far away as Kashmir as possible. So I come from the South Indian state of Tamil Nadu, and we've been fortunate enough to never have any conflicts, and we've lived this privileged life of, having peace for centuries. But my interest in this actually comes out of my interest is in hate speech and dehumanization, and that I'm a doctor by profession, and my interest in hate speech drove me to look at the various constructs of hate speech and how they enable mass atrocities against fellow humans, and and even genocide, right? And so that's where I'm coming from, and there are some deeply troubling patterns in this movie that weaponize the plight of the pundits, which cannot be denied, to promote hatred and even genocide, and that's what's troubling, and that's what I have an interest in. If that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to ask both of you before we get into the actual film and the actual story of what happened to the Pandits, if you could also tell us what I asked you the same question that Claire asked me. Why do you think this film is important? It's beside the fact that India, then the far right in India, is promoting it as a historical document. Could you begin, Altaf, telling us why you think the film is important, the Kashmir Files?
Yes, yeah, it's an important film because it's a part of propaganda of the current regime. But it's not just we can see this film has come just in these days. What the Indian governments, the successive governments in India and their intelligence have been doing for last 33 years, especially to dehumanize the Kashmiris, Kashmiri Muslims, and their struggle and relating it to terrorism has been a part of the Indian propaganda over the last 33 years. And you might have seen about the EU disinfo lab information is how India created fake websites and fake newspapers around the globe in order to malign Kashmiri freedom struggle as terrorism, related terrorism, and to pan-Islamism, and thereby defaming it, and in order to making a propaganda, and at the same time making these Kashmiri pundits as victims and to start their victimhood. And this is unfortunate. I will go rather back, Mary, if you will allow me. Some of the Kashmiri pundits, Kashmiri Hindus, it's not for the first time they are playing this victimhood. They have been playing this for centuries in Kashmir. Though they were the 4% of the population for last 160 years, they have remained the 4% of the population in Kashmir. But they have always been ruling the Kashmir. They were always on the side of the ruler who was there oppressed Muslims. But I'll tell you, it's not for the first time that they had managed this exodus of Kashmiri Pandits then in a way to make a propaganda against Kashmiri Muslims, that it were the Muslims who forced the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir and did a genocide of Kashmiri Pandits. If you'll go back to the history, most of the foreign writers have written that when they came to Kashmir, they will see the people naked with low income, with very weak physique and all that. He was a Kashmiri Muslim because he was disempowered forward by firstly by Sikhs, then by Dogras, and overall. In 1931, when the Kashmiris, firstly Kashmiri Muslims started in order to organize themselves for their political rights. And it was for the first time when on 13th of July 1931, we saw that massacre of 22 Kashmiris in Srinagar. And thereafter, a Galansi Commission was formed by the Maharaja of Kashmir with the British Raj, a Galansi Commission. That commission was to find out, because Kashmiri Muslims were nowhere in the government jobs. All the government jobs were held by the Kashmiri Pandits or from the outsiders. Then Galansi Commission advised that these marginalized people who are the majority, these disempowered people should be given the government job. At that time, because that then the Galansi Commission asked the government to allot the jobs proportionately about according to the population. And at that time, Kashmiri Pandits, some of the groups of Kashmiri Pandits at that time even asked the Maharaja not to implement the Galansi report, because it will not give us the opportunity to have the government. Or if you are not going to respond to our demands, then allow us to Kashmir Valley, we will go to the India. And they used this threat in 1967 also. They used this threat in 1932 also. And then before this, the armed militancy, when it started in Kashmir, before it, in 1988, a Kashmiri Hindu writer he was also the president of the Kashmiri All India Kashmiri Pandit Conference, GN Jattu. He wrote that as silent Kashmiri not getting jobs in Kashmir. Kashmiri Pandits always played from 1947 onwards. They played this victimhood in the mainland India, where they said we are being victimized by the Kashmiri Muslims and all that, and always were part of the conspiracy in the Indian PMO's office against the Kashmiris in one way or the other way. Unfortunately, after 1989, when this freedom struggle started in Kashmir, the current freedom struggle started in Kashmir, I tell you, which also the former Ra chief, A.S. Dolat, who was the IB chief in Kashmir during all this period, he has written it that none of the Kashmiri Pandits was killed because he was a Kashmiri Pandit, or none of the Muslim was killed because he was a Kashmiri Muslim. People were killed because the state was at war with the freedom fighters, and freedom fighters or the people were at war with the state. And at that time, when the large rallies of people came out, there were house was vandalized in that period. It's not that which I am telling. It is what the A.S. Dolat, who was the IB chief at that time, who says it. who has been the former Ra chief, who says it, and Vijay Bakaya, who has been the commissioner, the commissioner in Kashmir. He is also a Kashmiri Pandit. He writes it. All these testimonies are there. Kashmiri Muslims, all those big gatherings, big protests, never damaged even a single Hindu property or a Kashmiri Pandit property at that time. What happened? You have already, you might have heard about it, you might have read about it. The first militant attack in Kashmir was on a police officer's house. He was a Muslim, Ali Muhammad Watali. He was a Muslim, and then a person who was killed by the militants in Kashmir, he was a Muslim. He was not an Hindu, and both were why they were attacked, because the freedom fighters thought that these people are collaborators with the government. So any killing which happened in Kashmir by the freedom fighters was in a way they thought that some person he's from Raw, he's from police, or he's from army, he's an informer. That was the cause that people became that, not because that he's a Kashmiri Hindu, he's of some faith or that faith. This was never there, and this is not there. And this has been verified by this A.S. Dolat also in his book also, that all these, and in a recent article also, that all those people, or if Kashmiri, he has written that we had a large number of Kashmiri Pandits in IB. Kashmiri Hindus in IB, they were working in IB. So, and also Kashmiri Muslims, whosoever became the target of the Kashmiri freedom fighters was to them an informer, not a Pandit, not a Muslim. So, what the exodus which took place, you might have, if you recall the history, because you are more than me on Kashmir, the recent history of Kashmir from 1990, when this Amira Qadr, this massacre took place at Maisyama on the 21st of March in 20 February 21 in 1990. It was before that, as soon as Jagmohan arrived, on 19th and 20th, this exodus started silently. There was no forced silence from the Kashmiri Muslims. This started, and from the day one, this propaganda machinery started as propagating that this has been done by the Kashmiri Muslims. They are doing this, they are doing that, and now they have made it in such a way that anybody who sees it, who goes to the to cinema to see it, it is a total incitement, hate towards Muslims. It creates, and it's not only the Kashmiri Muslims, the Muslim population of India, their lives have been endangered by this film, and it has also created an international impact also, because those people who are in the power corridors, they are now looking at it in a different context. Unfortunately, what has happened to Kashmir from 1989 to the Kashmiri Muslims and others, nobody listens to those cries, and nobody is there to document a movie like this and to pant it like a propaganda like this, because this movie, as we have seen in past also, always the government of India intelligence agencies did finance some of the movies in order to create some of the narrative on ground. But this time, the Prime Minister of India, the Home Minister of India, Prime Minister tweets for it, and the Home Minister of India met the cost and crew of this movie, and also we have seen that this has been the tax free. What does it mean? Why government of India is doing so much to propagate this to outside world? And this is only to incite hate against Kashmiris, Kashmiri Muslims, and Muslims in India in general.
Thank you, Altaf. Haroon, would you like to answer that question? Why you think that the film is so important to respond to?
Yeah, I think this film is a really classic example of two things, of dangerous speech, which has been and dangerous speech and hate speech and genocidal hate speech, really, which has been extensively researched by people like Susan Bench and Jonathan Maynard, right? The second reason it is really important is that it offers these opportunities to highlight that this is exactly the kind of discourse that takes place in pre-genocidal states, right? So we know for a fact, Genocide Watch, the Holocaust Museum and Genocide Watch have all released alerts for genocide alerts for India and in Kashmir, and I think this Kashmir has been seen as the second likeliest place in the world for a genocide to occur, and this movie offers a great example of and a very disturbing example of how genocidal discourses occur. Right. To start with, we cannot and should not, deny that there was a Pandit exodus. Yes, Pandits were killed. Numbers should not matter. Even loss of one life is to be condemned. Right. So that's true. Okay. But what this movie does is it takes that angst of the Pandits and exceptionalizes it. For instance, like Altaf was saying, Muslims were killed by the militants too. Sikhs were killed by the militants too, and it portrays as Pandits, the suffering of Pandits, and exceptionalizes it. And what it does to the suffering of Muslims is actually it delegitimizes it, right? And it vilifies Muslims and portrays them as barbaric, vile, lecherous, and therefore it says that's okay. The vile, lecherous, dehumanized people. Don't worry about them, right? And that's a disturbing narrative that comes out of it. The second narrative that comes out of it is by portraying them as wild barbarians. You create this binary of a Muslim perpetrator and a Hindu victim, which completely negates the complicity of the government in doing that, like Altaf talked about. For instance, right today, last week, the Chief Minister of Delhi came up and asked a very legitimate question. Yes, we talk about exodus of Pandits. It happened 30 years ago. Well, we are down here 30 years ago. Out of the 30 years, at least, I think 15 years or 13 years, where the government in power was the present BJP government, what has it done to ensure that there's a dialogue, a meaningful dialogue, and ensure they return to the valley? So there's gross government incompetence, right? And what do you do with gross government incompetence? You shift the narrative into hate narrative and dangerous speech constructs, where you do these things of vilifying people, creating them as a threat, right? By creating this binary of Muslim and Muslim perpetrator and a Hindu victim. And then once you create them as a threat, it's okay to incite violence against them. It's okay to promote genocide against them, and this is what has happened over and over again. Before the Holocaust, they vilified the Jews, and then they said it's okay. Genocide was fine because if we didn't do that, they would have committed a genocide on us. A very disturbingly similar narrative this movie runs. Talks about Hindu genocide to legitimize and make the impending genocide of Kashmir is acceptable. So that's what's really disturbing. And so to me, this movie is a great opportunity to talk about how such narratives enable genocide. If that makes sense.
Yes, I agree. It's a time to actually educate about it. I think that one of the problems of of responding to it is that there aren't a whole lot of good sources of information about what actually happened. Wikipedia, of course, is mostly a Hindu right-wing source. It's been edited. The entries have been edited by the Hindu right-wing. And so if somebody wants to get a basic understanding of what happened, they will hear the Hindu right-wing version of it on Wikipedia. And there aren't a lot of good sources about it. People are vague. So in that way, the these filmmakers can claim almost anything they like. They claim that they interviewed 700 people, survivors, policemen, government operatives, and all of that to come up with this pandit genocide. So, can you tell us, Altaf and then Haroon, can you tell us what the movie, what the Kashmir Files claims happened in the valley between 1989 and throughout the 90s? Can you tell us the basics of what they claim happened in this quote pandit genocide? Altaf, can you begin?
Yeah, actually, what they claim that it was systematic on behalf of the Kashmiri Muslims, and they were asked, they were tasked Pakistani intelligence agencies to do this and that, and then to force the Kashmiris out of Kashmiri Pandits out of Kashmir, and then so that they can pursue their goals of ethnic cleansing of this Kashmiri Pandits. So that is what they want to say, and in that way they make a connection to the past. They always, what I said earlier, they say that we were always at the receiving end in Kashmir at the hands of Kashmiri Muslims. They make some references to the past also. But that is unfortunate. When we go to the past, we see these people, our Kashmiri Pandit brothers, they were always an arm of the oppressor. They were never oppressed. They were the arm of the oppressor at every time, be that Sikh rule, be that the Maharaja's rule. There was only one time in Kashmir when we can refer to Sikandar Azam when invaded the subcontinent and entered into Kashmir. That was a time when there was a Muslim dominance in a way in that area through power. But thereafter, there was never forced conversion of the Kashmiri Pandits. They talked about the forced conversion. There was never forced conversion of Kashmiri Pandits. But I told you that for last 160 years, the percentage of Kashmiri Pandits in Kashmir, it remains 4% in Kashmir. They never declined from that. If there was a forced conversion, or if there was some time of ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri Pandits, they would have not been there. But the census of from 1989 says 2011 it on to 1941, the Kashmiri Pandits total their figure in Kashmir was 76,000. It was not in lakhs also. They were only this much, 76,000. So you can see this population now in 1991 they were 3 point some lakhs in Kashmir, not more than that. And now in film they claim that about 4,000 Kashmiri Pandits were killed, where the government sources, which they have themselves approached to the police, and police in one way says that 89 Kashmiri Pandits were killed in different incidents. Then there is a record from the when what Mufti Said talked in the assembly, he talked about 234 non-Muslims were killed. But when we count these 89 or 234 non-Muslims were killed, we have see how many Muslims were killed during that time. Uh, and if we count all those Muslims who were count, that number is far more than bigger than these. And when we talk about these killings of non-Muslims in Kashmir, Mary, believe me, one of the incidents, and you have well read that of Chatti Singh Pora, one incident in which 36 were massacred in Kashmir. And that was attributed at that time that these were the foreign militants who killed them. But and after 5 days they killed 5 persons and said we have now we have done with those foreign militants who were involved in Chatti Singhpura. There was agitation and their bodies were they were drawn from those graves, and they were testified, DNA tests were held, and those were local people, local laborers, who army asked them to show us some way to go somewhere, and they were killed and dubbed as foreign militants. And that was done on the time when President Clinton was visiting India. And because at that time, USA was talking about the human rights violations in Indian occupied Kashmir very loud and clear. In order to give the USA message that you see, we are facing the terrorism, our minorities are being killed by the Pakistani terrorists or Kashmiri terrorists and all that, that was managed. Like that, another incident took place when some UN Secretary General was visiting India, and we saw a Van Hama massacre taking place, and such incidents which were state managed, and they in order to twist the things, because those were the people, Kashmiri Pandits, who never left Kashmir. When the Kashmiri, if it was an exodus, those Kashmiri Pandits who were in Kashmir, who did not leave Kashmir from 89 to 2003, why should Kashmiri Muslims kill them? So it was also a state managed by the Indian agencies in order to propagate it again, because the way they were propagating it was not getting consumed by the people outside, and they did again and again. And this time they found, I think, the way, the timing of this film, the way the elections in UP and other states of India and other things, in order to submit their vote and to grab their sympathies and from external sympathies. But we are very thankful to some of the Kashmiri Pandits, a large number of Kashmiri Pandits, elderly people who have been Kashmir, and some are still in Kashmir and some are outside Kashmir. They have loudly and clearly spoken against this Kashmir Files. They have negated what this Kashmir Files speaks, the way it has propagated. They always say that we were protected by our Kashmiri brothers, we were frightened, we left and all that, but our Kashmiri Muslim brothers never did kill us. And some of the people who came back, they are there at their homes. So those people have very much, but unfortunately, you see, when these people left outside, they fell in the hands of RSS and BJP outside Kashmir. And a large number of people are now associated with RSS, Shiv Sena, and BJP, and they are so much radicalized by them. And this saffron terrorism has now engulfed whole of India, and it is now crossing the boundaries of India with this propaganda, the way they have created in this movie.
Haroon, could you answer that question about what the film actually claims happened with this so-called Pandit genocide?
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, this is a hate film and nothing else. And let me summarize that. And the way it does that. So the core idea of the film is to construct Kashmiri Muslims as an existential threat. That is the only main. And so when you construct someone as an existential threat, it's absolutely okay to commit a genocide on them. So that's what the movie says, and I'll expand on that. So to answer your question, there are many valid sources where, neutral sources, where you can get data. You had the National Human Rights Commission in 1990s, which, gives figures about deaths. You had the Pandit Changarsh Committee's own records, which gives certain figures about the death. And, like Altaf Wani said, those documents, even the national, they also talk about Muslim deaths, which are a lot more, and Sikh deaths, which are there too. So, but what this movie does is it ignores all of that, right? And there are other high court judgments and others which talk about government incompetency that led to the exodus, right? So you don't talk about that. You don't talk about Muslim deaths. You don't talk about Sikh deaths. What you do, though, is you create a threat so that you can, once you create a threat and create the Muslims as an existential threat, And it's okay to kill them. It's okay to do anything against them, right? And that is the main focus of the movie, right? And so how does it do that? It creates Muslims as these barbaric, wild, lecherous people throughout the movie, right? And holds them completely responsible for the pundits. And he creates this binary. So here are the Muslims who are the perpetrators, right? And here are the poor pundits. The government had nothing to do with it. No Muslims died, but these guys are an existential threat. And guess what? If you don't get rid of them, it's going to get worse. You know, you're not going to be on the planet, right? And that is the narrative that's most disturbing. You see what I mean? And that is the most troubling narrative, because we know that this is the exact discourse that happened before the Holocaust. We know that this is the exact discourse that happened before the Rwandan genocide. And so that is what is troubling. And that's what needs to be called out. And evidence of that is very simple. You look at all the movies. There was a doctor in the US who comes out and says, we need to pay them back in equal, right? And there are people, there's another, 20-something-year-old who comes out right after seeing the movie and says, we need to impregnate all Muslim women so that they have Hindu children, right? Horrible, horrible scenes, right? And if that's not evidence to us, and if you're not seeing that, we are either blind, we're willfully blind and nothing else, right? So what does this movie do? It is a threat. It creates Muslims as a threat construction to legitimize and make the impending genocide, which we know is going to happen, as per acceptable and necessary. You see, that is what's disturbing. Yes, there's a lot of context to that, but this is one single message that needs to go across. This is a genocidal discourse and nothing else. And that's validated by the fact that it constructs the Muslims as the sole threat, dehumanizes them, and to make the impending genocide acceptable and necessary. That's all. That is the single message that needs to come out of this movie. And the fact that the state is openly supporting this movie raises significant concerns about state complicity in the genocidal planning process. And that's what's disturbing, if that makes sense.
Thank you. That was very interesting. One of the things that the movie does is it completely ignores the Indian occupation with thousands of troops. I don't actually know how many thousands there were at that time in 1990. There are 900,000 now, but I don't think it was that level at that time. But it ignores all of the violence, the Kunan Pushpora, the several massacres that occurred, including on starting in the month of January. There were several marches that went on. It completely ignores all of those things and focuses on Islamist terrorists, Pakistani-sponsored Islamist terrorists, and that plays into the whole Islamophobia that they're perpetrating now in India, and it also caters to the Islamophobic war on terror. It plays right into that, so that's why, as Altaf pointed out, there's an international dimension to promoting this film. But I think we need to address this question of the level of armed militancy at that time, whether it was sponsored by Pakistan or not. The Kashmiris, who during that period took up arms as a strategy. I know I read recently that there were only 176 armed militants at that time. But if you could take up the question, does the film... Yes.
Mary, can you hear me? Could I jump in a minute before we explore that?
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pick up, really, it was where Haroon was talking there about, the direct impact or wish of the movie is to, carry on promoting the Muslims as Islamic extremists. And it was tapping into something I was talking about with Haroon earlier, and it's about evidence, finding the evidence. And so for myself, my journey was in the social media. It's from living you know, in the Western world, seeing nothing in our media except Islamic terrorists. And that idea we are fed in the Western world is that terrorism and Muslims are terrorists. And then for myself, did you want to jump in there, Haroon?
Yeah, no,
Jump
quickly,
in.
if I may say, it's beyond terrorists. So there's actually no distinction between a Muslim and a terrorist. Every Muslim is an existential threat. That
Right.
is what the
Yeah.
movie
What?
conveys, right?
Yeah.
So every single Muslim is an existential threat, and the only way you can, and evidence of that is very simple. Movie theaters in around the world, where there were no Kashmiris, there were no terrorists, got up and said we should, exterminate Muslims, we should, impregnate Muslim women, so on and so forth. So
Yes.
every Muslim is a threat, and
Yes.
and so
Yeah.
your question about army and all of that, a nuanced movie would definitely do that, right? This is a very simple movie. The simple message is Muslims are existential threats. It's okay to commit a genocide. Let's start with Kashmir.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like I say, for me, with dialogue, a lot of the evidence that we're talking about, I think, comes from people within the dialogue. So over the last couple of years, the amount of dialogue that's going on between people that exposes the fact that Muslims aren't a threat in any degree. And when you're watching, when you look through all the Twitter feeds, you know, you can see who's being democratic. I mean, I've almost learned to tell you who comes from, you know, who's from Pakistan, who's from India, who's from Kashmir, who's from Azad. I can almost point out just through the experience of the dialogue. But there was always, before I knew I'd even heard of Pandits, there was always the what about the Pandits? What about the Pandits? They weren't listening to anything. And then, Mary, as you said, the Indian occupation of Kashmir is overlooked. Now, my concern, of course, in all of this is the likes of the political prisoners that are held. You've seen Malik currently undergoing, you know, his trial, and it's like handing on a plate to the people. Well, here's, you know, we can get our own back. Here's some revenge here because he's part of this whole lot. And so that's where the genocide or the hate speech is being built, because it's going to be okay to, you know, before we know it, if this isn't fought against, you know, we'll be seeing them hanged. We'll be seeing the genocide. The warnings are already there anyway. So I think that is the concern. We had the question, should we just ignore the Kashmir Files so that it doesn't get attention, or should we bring it out? And I think, you know, it was raised very much, no, we need to bring this out. We need to make the point of this, you know, because it's the opportunity. I think sometimes with their actions, they're exposing themselves. So we're seeing in the UK government, some of the MPs, two or one in Maine, bringing up an early day motion to say the fact that the Kashmiri Pandits was a genocide, not looking at anything else, but just tapping into it again, out into the UK people, you know, and without this social media and without us linking, you know, this is a powerful tool and a powerful weapon for us to expose everything. And as much as the evidence is in the research, it's also in personal people's stories, people that were children at the time that saw it happen, you know, that the army, the way, you know, the personal stories are very much the evidence as well, I believe. So, Mary, thank you. And back to you with your the armed struggle question.
Thank you. No, thank you. That was useful. I'm interested whether the film, I guess, Haroon, you kind of answered it, whether the film focuses on the so-called Islamist terrorists, or whether, in fact, as you said, it portrays all Muslims as potential terrorists. Do you want to address that, both of you, Altaf and Haroon? How it feeds into the whole Muslim hating that's being promoted, not just in India, but all over the world. Do you want to begin, Altaf?
I think Haroon has already, I think, answered this question. That this film is clearly, it shows that all the Muslims are an existential threat. So every Muslim is a terrorist to them. It's not only the Islamic terrorists. To them, this film portrays each and every Muslim. On one hand, it portrays each and every Muslim as a society. They are the radicals, they are the violent, they are the intolerant, and they can do anything like that, killing, bombing, and all that. It's all Muslims, so we have to deal with it. One part of film is like this, and the second is in order to create an atmosphere for its intelligence agencies, for its army, and all that, for the persecution of Kashmiri Muslims in Kashmir, and then for that matter also in the India also. And one we have seen most recently, but we see already lots of our people all in jail, or lots of our people have already met discriminatory they have been dealt in discrimination in the jails also, and in also during the hearings and also trials, and also this the judgments by the Supreme Court of India and all that. They have never been up to the mark on justice. Now, what Indian government at this point of time, when this film has been released and when it is in the Indian cinemas and all over, and people come out and chant slogans against Kashmiri Muslims, against Islam, and against Kashmiri leaders, and Indian government has planned in order to firstly to create an atmosphere like this, and then make Kashmir of it. Yasin Malik is in danger by virtue of him, because he has been and one of the others is the Farooq Kamardar, Bita Karate. He is the one who has been released by the courts already for so many cases. Now he is in the jail because of the UAPA, the terror funding case. He is there, but now a Kashmiri Pandit group has approached it again to the Tada court to start a fresh trial of Farooq Amadar after this movie came in. So it is a threat in a way, and Indian government wants to eliminate some of the Kashmiri leaders through this now through the through the judicial system, who are already in jail and already try to create an atmosphere for the Indian army and people in India in general for the persecution of Kashmiris, so that there should be no voice for Kashmir, because we had a lot of voices in India. There were lots of people in India who would talk about the rights of the Kashmiri people, who would talk about the excesses the people of Kashmir are meeting from north to south, from east to west. In India, we had a lot of people who are talking, but from last 7-8 years, we have seen they are already facing the persecution at the hands of this current regime, and whosoever is left, there is no room left for them to talk for the Kashmiris because of this current movie, the way it has thwarted the Kashmiri Muslims and Islam as a whole.
Thank you. Haroon, would you like to answer that? To address
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think it's really easy to find out what the movie is saying, right? You just look at the reactions, and like I was saying, every single theater, people come out and say we need to pay back them with the same coin, pay them back with the same coin, and sexualized violence is okay against Muslims, right? Against any Muslim. No, it's okay, any Muslim, right? And so that is the message it's promoting, right? And when it promotes it, again, I'm not aware. I'm clearly not an expert in the nuances of who did what. But what it does is any human rights violation is okay. Why is it okay? Well, he's an existential threat to you. Why do you care about his human rights, right? He is an existential. If they will, wipe you on the face of the earth. So, what are you kidding me? Why do they need human rights, right? So that's a narrative that's troubling. And I think if there's one message out of this movie that needs to be hit over and over again, is it is a pre-genocidal discourse. And if, as a part of the human race, we've said over and over again that never again genocide, and if we don't recognize this after seeing the reactions in the theaters, we have to ask ourselves if we are sincere in saying never again, right? And that's what's troubling. We really need to recognize that it's a pre-genocidal discourse and nothing else.
It's very alarming, actually.
Yeah.
What do you think we should do to respond to this film? I know that it's being promoted also in the United States, by the way. There's all sorts of articles about where to catch it when it starts to stream on Netflix or whatever, where to catch it in the movie theaters. The movie industry is pushing it because it fits in so comfortably to the war on terror, the Islamophobia, the hatred for Muslims, the justification for war and genocide. So, how do you think we can respond to this effectively? What do you think we should do? Because I think you're absolutely right that this is a prelude to something very threatening to Muslims in Kashmir and in India, first and foremost. Altaf, do you want, or Harun, do you want to start?
Arun, start.
Okay.
I think, in any civil society, right, you give the benefit of the movie of the doubt and get the experts to assess it, right? Dangerous speech experts like Jonathan Maynard, Sushan Bench, who are experts at this dangerous speech that leads to genocide. We can show to them and ask, what do you think, right? We can ask genocidal organizations like Genocide Watch, Holocaust Museum, and say, what do you think, right? And if they come out and say that this pre-genocidal discourse, all we have to do is go to the governments and say, there's something called the UN Convention on Prevention of Genocide. And guess what? The US has signed it, UK has signed it, Australia has signed it, New Zealand has signed it, right? So if we are serious about our commitments and obligations to the UN Convention on Prevention of Genocide, why are we promoting a movie that enables genocide? Explain that to us, right? And it's a simple binary question. Are we serious about that or are we not? If we are, why are we promoting this movie?
Thank you. Altaf? Altaf? Altaf, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think Harun has beautifully articulated it. If we are there to, as he said, yeah, I do hear. I'm responding to you. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Mary, do you hear me? Yeah, Harun has beautifully articulated the answer to your question that if there is a against genocide and already there's that world wants to avoid genocide. If there is such a thing, if they want to avoid genocide, why as such a movie is being promoted which incites the people for genocide, for which already Genocide Watch has already given an alert that there is a impending genocide in Kashmir and in northeast of India, in Assam, and also Muslims in India. So now this film is also promoting that genocide to happen. As Arun said, everybody coming from the theater outside said we have to pay in the same coin. We should get ready and eliminate them this time. Otherwise, they've come again. So they're making each and every Muslim threat and thereby eliminating. So this needs to be made public that this film basically this is not a genocide, but they are promoting a genocide. They are promoting an upcoming genocide of the Muslims in Kashmir and also in India, which are at the receiving for the at this time also. So this should be the one of the arguments is this, and in order to correct some of the things which the movie has portrayed totally differently. That's a long debate. How we can correct that? How we can reach out to the people, because it's very difficult to reach out to each and every person who has seen it on Netflix or in the theater or anywhere else. But whatever we can do is to see that what actually this movie promotes. Does it serve the humanity, or it is against the principles of the humanity, or it promotes the genocide? So we should, I think, promote that that by promoting this movie, actually the government of India, the promoters of the movie, or the financiers, they are promoting a genocide, the upcoming genocide, which will be a dangerous thing for the peace and security of not only this region, but I think it will be a threat to the global peace then.
Would you be interested? You're always full of ideas. Would you like to respond to that question also?
Yeah, I think it was covered really well. I think the biggest aim and the first aim and the best aim is go into our governments with exactly those areas we've explored. But what we need to do, obviously, or that will help that more, is the unity work that comes with that. If we can go at the governments, all countries as a big driving force, rather than dribs of drabs of individuals. I mean, obviously that will all help, but I think it would be really good that, there's a good network of support. There's so many groups, organizations in the world that would tap into this. And I think even reaching, the peace movements, all other organizations that are working for humanity, Amnesty International, even courses like that would, once we've built that growth, but even at the not the smaller levels, but the other level is where we've been conversing with, first of all, we went to the cinemas, who then referred us to like the film guidance people, the boards that give it, and so in conversations with them, where it's at now, I mean, with the British one, they have said, they've amended some of the title. They're calling it now a Hindu drama rather than based on a fact. And they've said they don't believe that it causes religious division and or hatred. And what it's done, as far as I'm concerned, is left a nice big wide open door for us to tell them and show them why it has caused a big religious division, give them the evidence that's out there, and the evidence is growing. So if we start going at the boards, the cinema boards in all countries, using the same format, and again, one big main letter with all the organizations and names on and individuals and everything, if they're hitting these places at once, that is then helpful. You only actually have to hashtag Kashmir Files on any social media platform, and you can see the dialogue of hate speech there already. This eye for the eye, for the tooth, the language that's being used, and you'll fundamentally find that all Muslims are consistently democratic, pushing the dialogue, living their beliefs. Whereas, not all Hindus, so I never like to generalize, but you will find the extreme Hindus or those that aren't, they're just attack. So you see it. And, we've seen people hate speech losing their Facebook pages, Twitter pages, and all these, there's evidence out there already. So I think it's raising the awareness of the film, standing against it. I think we've covered it a little bit, but our politicians are promoting it. We've got people at government level saying, go and see this film. We don't see them saying, go and see some other film and let's stand up for this. And it's a big thing again of what about the pandits? Whereas what about humanity? What about all of the humanity should come above religion, in my opinion, anyway, and then that it's comes down, not down, but these are people's beliefs, own religious beliefs that live their lives, and you've got someone coming in and attacking it. That's not right. And so I think it's unity. I think it's the cinema boards, and I think it's the governments, with as many of us coordinating and working together as we can. And anybody that's watching, any people anywhere, making contact, reaching, talking on social media, on the Twitter feeds, using the hashtag Kashmir Files, because that can connect us all together and support where we can support. One of the MPs, I referred to it earlier, in the UK, making an early morning motion to have the Pandit exodus as a genocide, calling for that one particular incident. Anybody that's in his constituency needs to be writing to him. He represents a whole constituency, not just one area. And other politicians need to be standing up against him for using the government in that way, I think. And that's within the UK. I don't know what is happening around other governments at the moment, but that that's the way, the campaign, the working together, getting the crucial evidence, the research, the backing, the experts, gathering the experts is a great idea. And as you say, it all comes back to, are we promoting genocide or aren't we promoting genocide?
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. Haroon or Altaf, do you have anything that you would like to say that we haven't covered?
No.
I want to just say one thing about this. I think if we don't address it, what we're going to find is what we have now when they portray most Muslims and certainly Arabs or Palestinians, is they're portrayed as in the most racist way and as terrorists, bomb throwers. And if we don't respond to this effectively, I think that they're going to begin to incorporate the presentation in film of Kashmiris as the same kind of thing, beady-eyed, racist depictions, and of course, bomb-throwing terrorists. So could you, it concerns, I think it's a great concern. So let me go back to asking you, Altaf and Haroon, if you have anything that you would like to talk about with this film. Anything
I think this film is an amazing opportunity, right, to highlight what dangerous speech is and educate our politicians. You see, most politicians are reasonable. You say that, look, this is dangerous speech, and the PGR just disclose, they'll say, oops, sorry, I didn't know that, right? So that's all it is, right? So this is a fantastic film. As a matter of fact, I think this film should be incorporated into every hate study and dangerous speech study. If anything, that'll be a great outcome, right? So people can look at it and say, all right, this is how you spread hate. This is how you enable genocide. And that'll be a fantastic tribute to the filmmakers, to tell them that they made a great movie that promotes hatred and enables genocide, and it also creates greater awareness. So I think this is a great movie, a great opportunity to have those discussions. Even the person who is doing the early day motion and say, look, here's a letter from Genocide Watch. Here's a letter, this is what, not a letter, but this is what Genocide Watch thinks. This is what, dangerous speech experts think. And what you're doing is promoting a pre-genocidal discourse. How do you feel about that?
Thank you. Altaf? Can you hear me, Altaf?
So I think lastly, I would like to through this medium. Yeah, I do hear. Through this medium, I want to tell the people, you to also. There's a book written by Kashmiri ex-bureaucrat Khalid Bashir Ahmed, and it's Kashmir exposing the myth behind the narrative. Kashmir exposing the myth behind the narrative. I'll send you the PDF copy of this book to you and circulate it. And this is the best description about the Kashmir, the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits. It talks about the way it happened. It talks about it, what happened during this course of time. It talks about the militancy. It talks about how Kashmiri people, and it talks about the background history of Kashmir right from 500-600 years back. History of Kashmir, it talks about that in detail. So it's a very good opportunity for people to actually to see through the lens of another person what basically happened in Kashmir from 1989, why it happened, how it happened, who were the people, who were the perpetrators, who were the victims, and were the victims because of the ethnicity or religion, or it was something else. So that makes us better to understand all these things and to expose what the India or the Indian cinema has promoted all the Muslims as terrorists, or all the Kashmiris Muslims as terrorists, or Islam as a religion of terrorism, what they have promoted, to negate that. That's the only way of doing it, because otherwise to make some other end of this, we don't have those much resources to do that. The way government of India and its tycoons are doing, the promoting a genocide around the globe at present.
Claire, would you like to add anything?
Only by way of finishing up, Mary, I think. Is there anything that you would like to say before we end the discussion? What would you like to wrap up with?
No, except that I think it's really important that we do respond to this film. I would like to ask if you think calling for a boycott of the film would serve any political purpose. I see that there is a call, and I know that in my youth, when we would have like racists touring the campuses, you know, racists that believed that blacks were intellectually inferior, we would pick at the meetings and say, you have nothing to learn from this white supremacist. There's nothing here to learn, and boycott his meeting. And I'm wondering if you think there would be any value to saying there's nothing to learn here except hatred, as Haroon pointed out. There's nothing to learn. Is there any value, do you think, to calling for a boycott of the film? And then discussion about what actually happened. Because something terrible did happen to the Pandits and to Muslims.
So, can I answer that? So, I was actually talking about this to some of the government agents here, and I'm going to say something really racist, so you'd have to forgive me on this. So, one of the things about this whole supremacist narrative is that most officers in law enforcement think that supremacists come in only one color, white. That's wrong, right? The whole idea of Hindutva supremacy is very similar to neo-Nazi supremacy. They're strikingly similar, right? Instead of the swastikas, they use different symbols, but it is the same narrative, right? So, like I said, you know, the whole pre-genocidal discourse is very similar to the one the Nazis carried out, right? So I think it's important for people to understand that supremacists just don't come in white color, right? They come in other colors, right? And this gives us the opportunity to talk about it. And I'll tell you why it's a threat. I think some of the people that we've been working with know that the biggest amplification, and I think it also came out in the Facebook leak, that the biggest amplification of neo-Nazi narratives is done by Hindutva supremacists. You know, the hate narratives on social media. Only because we're just a bigger country, we're more people, more hands on deck. So we amplify hate amazingly well. So I think it's important to talk about it and talk about how it affects humanity and how it drives genocide. So if there's one message that needs to come out of this discussion is this is a hate movie that's driving genocide, and it's very similar to, you know, what the Nazis did. Guess what? You have Nazis so brown in color too.
Thank you. Altaf, do you think it should be boycotted?
Thank you. I don't have anything to add.
You don't? Okay. Claire?
Yeah, no, totally agree. I mean, I would add, I guess, any movie where a boycott is called for, automatically, even if it was boycotted, people would look for it. But the point would be it's boycotted for a reason. Personally, for me, I would go for the boycott, because I'm working or campaigning for the name Kashmir and all the issues that lie below it, including this one, to be heard. And as I've said, when I've been on the streets of Glasgow, there are all too many people that might have heard of Kashmir rugs and shawls, and then younger ones who haven't even heard the name Kashmir, let alone what's going on. So, you know, on those many different levels, you know, one from the extreme hate and the importance of why we shouldn't be showing movies like this and encouraging what they are promoting, but right down to the, you know, so the stamping that out, but then also the raising the awareness. So the Kashmir Files, you know, with a campaigning head on, it's an ideal tool to show why Kashmiris should have their right to decide, because look at the traumas, the evidence, the research, the things that all this conversation and dialogue is throwing up, even the discussion that we've had here tonight are we going to want to watch this all over again? So if this repeats, we'll see a genocide of the Muslims, and then will we see some retaliation somewhere else? And then it goes on and on and on. And somewhere that has to stop, and somewhere has to say enough. So by tackling the root of the evil in this movie, that's why I would push for the ban and the boycott to raise that. That would be my personal take on that.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any more
Yes.
questions.
Okay, Mary, thank you so much. Really good questions, because it got really good insight. Altaf and Arun, really thank you. The
Thank you very
knowledge,
much.
the research, the dialogue we've had up, it's been brilliant. I would just like to encourage all viewers as well, please, in taking this forward, that every 5th of every month we have our Solidarity for Kashmir, where we all join in with our tea to raise the name, to raise the awareness. We can use the platform for the Kashmir Files. So this 5th, hashtagging it with the Kashmir Files, it's building the unity, it's raising the name, it's raising the awareness. So on the 5th of April, it's simply share your cup of tea, upload it to social media with the hashtag Solidarity for Kashmir to raise that awareness. And obviously, any posts, information, news that's out, that share that so that we can reach the world. And hopefully, we'll gain the support through this movie. There's a lot of mileage to go with this year. It won't solve overnight, and there's lots of issues we will be able to use. If we could say they've shot themselves in the foot with it, then we have to make sure that they are shooting themselves in the foot with it, and help them to show how they have, and humanity all the way, really. So thank you very much to all the guests and Mary, and thank you anybody that's tuned in and supporting. We welcome your comments and all dialogues. I think actually I've got a couple of comments sitting up. I'll just post them up just in case there's any questions there. We got somebody saying very happy to listen to our discussion, which is great. Let's pop that up on the screen. So that's nice. People suggesting about Kashmir being used as a buffer zone, so that there's peace, then protect, peace in the area, Pakistan and India. And about, there's something here about as well, talking about the load shedding in the area. So other issues that go on there. So thank you everybody for your comments. Hopefully we'll be back here in another couple of weeks with looking more at insight into Kashmir, any issues surrounding it. So thank you everybody, and good night to you, and good morning to you in Australia.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.